Hi guys, welcome to the UEBC 2022 hosted by JPS here in Melbourne, Australia. I am joined by the illustrious Dr. Mike Israetel. Dr. Mike, thank you for sitting down with me and chatting, and well done on a fantastic presentation on DOMs and what DOMs can tell us. And just to kind of go into a bit more depth about some of the things you mentioned in your presentation, I wanted to get your thoughts on whether we might be able to use DOMs as a trackable metric when assessing kind of the extent of tension throughout a program, how that might look from week to week.
Yeah. So you basically, if you get reliable delayed onset soreness that lasts until your next hard session for that muscle group, you can kind of be sure that on the training difficulty front, you're probably doing enough. If for nothing else, conceptually, how could you possibly do more?
Sure.
And then you get so sore that you wouldn't even be able to train. That doesn't make any sense. So if you're getting reliable, like pretty intense DOMs, you're definitely not doing too little. And then if you're still not getting the kind of growth that you want, you may be interested in manipulating other program variables, nutrition, sleep, different nuances of program design, maybe different rep ranges, blah, blah, blah. But it's probably not going to be, I need to train harder, which is kind of an awesome thing, right? Because if you get reliable DOMs back to back to back, you can rule out training hard as anything that affects your program anymore because you're already doing it as hard as you can. Then it's kind of like a huge relief, at least intellectually, because you're like, well, I know that if I just move on to nutrition and I sort of close the gaps there, I'm kind of doing my best, and there's not really anything mysterious I'm leaving on the table. Because it would suck if you did like a bodybuilding show, right? When you took second and someone came up to you and they're like, how hard were you training for this? You're like, I think pretty hard. And they're like, how do you know you're training hard enough? And you're like, well, I don't know. Maybe I should have trained harder, fuck. But if you really got consistent DOMs, it's very difficult to make the case that you could have been training harder.
For sure. And obviously we mentioned that a lot of context comes into play when we talk about DOMs. Do we have much of an indication on what are the genetic factors that dictate how much DOMs we experience? Is it kind of muscle group to muscle group? Is it individual to individual? What's the kind of the level of discrepancy on that front?
It's all those things for sure.
Yeah.
One of the big ones is muscle architecture, and some muscles are just very hard to stretch under load, and thus they don't get a lot of DOMs. But there's no coincidence that they also have trouble growing. Because training at long muscle lengths has been shown as a superior way of inducing hypertrophy. And if like your side delts, for example, like how do you stretch them? It's tough because you'd have to move through your own body. There's tricky ways of doing it, but it's tough. So at the end of the day, it's kind of like, that's definitely a factor. And then in addition to that, I think that people who have muscles that are more growth prone and are faster twitch generally tend to have an easier time causing late onset soreness.
Sure.
One of the examples I give is Jared Feather has like the biggest calves of all time or something. And the first time and last time he ever tried to train his calves, he did like 3 sets of 10 and he was sore for like 2 weeks, so he could barely walk. And it's like, okay, there's something really there as a growth response. Whereas, imagine a long distance runner, I guarantee you they're not getting sore calves from running, because how the hell would they run? So.
And so let's say we've got a client, we've got a maybe a late beginner, early intermediate, and he or she has gone into his first week of training, new program, maybe a new coach, different style of different exercises, X, Y, Z, and there's pretty severe DOMs after one day. What would you suggest the rest of their training week would look like if we're looking at pretty global DOMs? So just I'm flipping sore, man, everywhere.
I would say if it was just 1 week, they can continue to train normally the rest of that week, but take a nice long time to warm up. Maybe go a little lighter and a little higher rep, because muscles that have a ton of DOMs are pre-injured already, and if you push them really hard, you could get hurt. But what I also say is reduce the volume that you were planning on doing significantly, such that you don't cause much more damage. So that when next week starts, the recommendation there is you do a lot fewer sets than you did in that first week. And you may find, I get almost no DOMs. Great. The week after that, you could do a little more and get like an intermediate amount of DOMs. I think that my best guess as to the situation that grows the most muscle, if I had to guess, I don't think this is likely to be very true, but if it was, is a little bit of DOMs. I think that's pretty close to the sweet spot. Crazy psycho maximum DOMs, maybe a little too much.
Not quite there.
Maybe you're just doing more damage than you are growth at that point. Zero DOMs at all, well, maybe you could be going a little bit harder. But if you get reliable DOMs just a little bit, I think that's great. So if your first week of the program starts with psychotic DOMs, is too much. If it starts with no DOMs at all, you can feel free to increase it by a little bit, because your target isn't, I want to end the world. I just want to get a little bit more of a stimulus.
Sure. And has research shown there to be any evidence of kind of bigger muscles, more advanced lifters who are maybe lifting heavy absolute loads getting more severe DOMs, or is it pretty kind of general? Is there like, okay, this is your pain 1 to 10, and it's going to stay that same 1 to 10 across your lifting career?
I haven't seen that sort of research published, mostly because they just almost never do research on advanced lifters. But from my long-term experience being around different kinds of lifters, if someone has a big muscle group that is genetically predisposed to growth and they're pretty advanced, getting them sore is just not that hard. Like, we have a lot of pro bodybuilders come and train on the RP YouTube channel, and like, 4 sets of leg press myo reps later, they're all real sore. Big giant quads, they respond well to training. It's not a big deal. And that is another thing that is interesting to point out, I suppose. Trainers who really, their one trick is to beat people up to get them sore, and they really pat themselves on the back for that. Well, you just do tons of stuff and you can get pretty much anyone sore. The real trick is, can they survive that over the long term? Can you do a safe, logical execution with a progressive element? And that's harder to do than just nuking somebody once.
For sure. I guess that's where the kind of difference between a personal trainer who maybe entertains their client for an hour and gets them super sore, as opposed to a coach who's looking at that more kind of holistic approach to working with their client.
Well, how sore are you now? How sore will you be next week? What is the progression to next week? It's just nuking clients once and then letting them go into the free world. It's fun and all, but also it doesn't accomplish a ton of really good things, certainly not in sequence. Another thing is that there's also real acute downsides, especially with beginners. It's very unlikely, but it's such a bad outcome that the effect magnitude is still something to worry about. Be concerned about. Think about is like, you can cause rhabdo in people, especially very unaccustomed people. You can cause rhabdo by exposing them to an insane stimulus. And as a trainer, you're just thinking, oh, I'm just going to get them really sore. But you can go overboard and really do a bit too much and then cause actual medical trouble. And like, well, I'll leave the names out of this, but some friends of mine recently were feeling really good during a leg workout and were kind of chasing each other as far as sets, and one of them got rhabdo. This is an advanced bodybuilder. And it's like, just going for broke and toasting the muscle, it's kind of thoughtless. And the upside is you'll get marginally more growth if you've been doing a real bad job. The downside is you could cause yourself to have very poor training for the next week, or cause yourself rhabdo, and I mean, geez, that could cause all sorts of bad stuff. Then that whole let me nuke my client into the moon thing, that becomes about as stupid as it sounds the first time you hear it.
Sure. And really, just to love your answers, and I really just want to wrap up with a bit more of a fun question today. So you've been in Australia for about a week or so now, that's right? We've been started in Perth, now we're here in Melbourne. If you had to take one aspect or maybe kind of rule or something along those lines from Australia back to the US with you, what would it be and why? Maybe a lifestyle element, something you've seen these guys do.
They dress up so well here. The fashion is so good. Everyone just looks so well put together. I've been walking around Melbourne feeling like a homeless asshole. And like an embarrassment to America and my ethnicity and everything, because everyone in Melbourne looks like they just walked out of like a fashion store and they've got a cup of like the world's best coffee in their hand. They look great, their girl looks great, fashion, and they're just living their best lives. And I don't know, man, can I take all that? That's a lot to take home.
I'd respectfully disagree personally. I'm liking the get up. For guys behind the screen.
I bought this in Melbourne.
We've also got the tie-dye Vans on today, which are completing the look.
See how stupid I look? Look at how great the rest of the UEBC crew looks.
It's all lies. It's all slander. So let's go vice versa. What would you, if you could bring one thing over from the US
Guns.
to here?
Just kidding. I'm
There
kidding.
you go.
I actually do have an answer to this. Stores that are open late. In the States, like if it's Sunday and it's 8 in the evening, you can go get groceries. But in Australia, that's a tough ask.
It's true.
Everyone goes home Sunday for the whole day, I think.
We're all in bed by 8. It's true.
But you get your rest and you get out fashionable and you get that great coffee.
It's beauty sleep, Mike.
It is beauty sleep. It's
sleep.
working.
It's what we need.
You guys are all beautiful, gorgeous people. And they're just Australians, just better looking than the rest of us. And I hate it. and I won't ever live it up.
I'd respectfully disagree, but I think that's a great way to end. I'm sure our Melbourne viewers will be very pleased to hear that. Dr. Mike, once again, thank you for taking the time to chat with me, and thank you for your presentation. Guys, if you missed Dr. Mike's presentation, stay tuned for the UEBC replay. That will be available for you to access, and hopefully we'll see you guys and Dr. Mike very soon.